My name is Ellie Martinez, and 3 years ago I was cleaning toilets in a high-rise while executives laughed at my rusted Honda in their precious parking lot. The gears cut through me like winter wind as I parked my 20-year-old Civic that morning. A man in a tailored suit loudly called my car an eyesore while stepping into his Tesla, completely unaware that the woman he mocked cleaned his office every night, saving every penny from my daughter's cancer treatments while silently forming a plan that would change both our lives forever. What devastating event pushed me to make the decision that transformed me from their mockery to their landlord? Share your own stories of overcoming humiliation in the comments. And if this tale of sweet justice touched your heart, please like, subscribe, and share with someone who deserves to see the underdogs win. I fumbled with my keys at our apartment door, careful not to wake Maya if she was still sleeping. The lock finally gave way with its familiar stubborn click. "Mom, is that you?" Maya called from our pull-out sofa bed, her voice still thick with sleep. "It's me, Mia. How are you feeling?" I set down my purse and the small bag of groceries I'd picked up after my night shift. Maya was sitting up, already checking her blood sugar. At 10 years old, she handled her diabetes with a maturity that broke my heart. Children should worry about playground games, not insulin levels. "I'm at 140. Not bad." She smiled, her eyes crinkling just like her father's used to. Our apartment was small, one room plus a kitchenette and bathroom, but I'd done my best to make it feel like home. Maya's drawings covered the refrigerator, and I'd hung fairy lights around her side of the room. Her medical supplies were neatly organized in plastic bins, labeled in her careful handwriting. "Did you get any sleep last night?" I asked, unpacking the groceries: eggs, beans, some vegetables on sale, and a small treat of fresh berries for Maya's carefully monitored diet. "Some. I finished my history project." She pointed to a poster board leaning against the wall. "It's about immigrants who changed America." I smiled, remembering my own father's journey from Mexico, the stories he told of determination and hope. Before losing everything to medical debt, he'd owned a small restaurant in Chicago. The irony wasn't lost on me. "I made coffee," Maya said, gesturing to the pot. I poured myself a cup, black and strong. "My hero." Maya swung her legs over the side of the bed, wincing slightly as she stood. Her legs had been bothering her lately, something the doctor said we needed to keep an eye on. "Code 4, there's a problem we can't afford to fix yet. You should sleep, Mom. I can make my own breakfast." I shook my head. "I'll sleep after you leave for school. Let me make you something proper." As I scrambled eggs, Maya pulled out her textbooks. She was always studying, determined to get a scholarship someday. The refrigerator held her latest test, 98%, with a gold star. "Remember, Mrs. Garcia is picking you up after school for your appointment," I reminded her. Our elderly neighbor watched Maya when my shifts overlapped with her school schedule. "I know, and you'll meet us at the clinic." "I'll be there." I didn't mention I'd had to beg my supervisor at the office building to let me leave early, or that I'd make up the hours by coming in at 3 a.m. tomorrow. As Maya ate, I counted out pills into her daily organizer and packed her lunch carefully measured portions, each with its carb count written on the container. "Mom, can I ask you something?" Maya's voice had that careful tone that meant she was about to request something we couldn't afford. "Always." Jenny invited me to her birthday party at the trampoline park on Saturday. I kept my face neutral, though my stomach sank. The entry fee, a present, the extra insulin she'd need from the activity it would cost at least $50 we didn't have. "Let me see what I can do," I said, which was our code for probably not. Maya nodded, understanding too well. She never complained, which somehow made it worse. As she gathered her things for school, I caught a glimpse of myself in the mirror, dark circles under my eyes, hair hastily pulled back, the uniform I'd changed out of my janitor's clothes into, for my morning receptionist job, already wrinkled. A lifetime ago, I'd worn tailored suits and closed million-dollar real estate deals before Maya's diagnosis, before Daniel's death, before life had become an endless calculation of medical costs versus basic needs. Maya hugged me goodbye, smelling of the discount shampoo we shared and the antiseptic wipes she used for her testing kit. "Love you, Mom. Get some sleep, okay? Love you more, Mia. Have a good day at school." After she left, I allowed myself 5 minutes to cry before setting my alarm for 2 hours of sleep. The following night, I arrived at Harrington Towers for my evening cleaning shift to find my Honda cordoned off with caution tape. A small crowd had gathered, including Victor Reeves, the owner of the parking lot, and several adjacent properties. "Ms. Martinez," Victor called out, his voice carrying across the lot. He was in his 50s, expensively groomed, with the confident stance of a man who'd never worried about his next meal. "We need to discuss your vehicle." I approached slowly, keys clutched in my hand. My car's windshield was cracked in a spiderweb pattern, and someone had keyed the driver's side door with the word trash. "What happened?" I asked, though I already knew. The security camera pointed directly at my parking spot told me this wasn't random. "Some of our tenants have complained about the eyesore," Victor said, not bothering to lower his voice despite the gathering audience. "We have standards to maintain." "Someone vandalized my car," I said, keeping my voice steady. "I'd like to see the security footage," Victor laughed. "Unfortunately, the cameras were malfunctioning last night. Technology, am I right?" He winked at a couple of executives who had stopped to watch. "I recognized one from yesterday, Teslaman. I need my car to get to my daughter's medical appointments," I said, hating the pleading note in my voice. "She has diabetes. I can't afford repairs right now." "Not my problem," Victor said. "In fact, I've decided to implement a new policy. This lot is now exclusive to Harrington Towers executives and approved visitors. Staff can park 3 blocks down at the public lot." "That lot charges $15 a day," I protested. "That's 2 hours of my wages." Victor shrugged. "Again, not my concern. You have until tomorrow to move this junk heap, or it'll be towed at your expense." He turned away, the matter settled in his mind. The executives snickered as they headed toward the elevator. I stood there, shaking with rage and humiliation, before getting into my damaged car. The key scratches were deep enough to show the metal beneath the paint. The windshield crack obscured part of my vision. I'd have to drive hunched forward to see clearly. My phone rang as I sat there. It was Mrs. Garcia. "Ellie, you need to come now," she said, her voice tight with worry. Maya's blood sugar dropped very low. "She's conscious but not good." I called an ambulance. My heart stopped. "Which hospital?" "St. Luke's." "I'll meet you there." I started the car with shaking hands. As I carefully navigated out of the lot, I saw Victor watching from the lobby, his face impassive as I drove past with my cracked windshield. The emergency room was bright and cold. Maya lay on a gurney, and, for in her arm, her face pale and drawn, Mrs. Garcia sat beside her, clutching her small hand. "What happened?" I asked the doctor, a young woman with kind eyes and a harried expression. "Severe hypoglycemia. Her blood sugar dropped to 38. Has she been taking her insulin as prescribed?" "Yes," I said automatically, then hesitated. Sometimes we stretch the doses. The newer insulin is so expensive, and our insurance only covers part." The doctor's face softened with understanding and something worse pity. "Ms. Martinez, I understand the financial burden, but diluting or skipping doses can be life-threatening." Maya stirred on the gurney. "Mom, I'm sorry. I took my regular dose, but then Jenny brought cupcakes for her birthday announcement and I only had a little bit, but I guess I calculated wrong and, Shimia, it's not your fault." I smoothed her hair back from her forehead, noticing how thin she'd become. "Everything's going to be okay." But as the doctor explained the new treatment plan and additional monitoring equipment we'd need, all I could think about was the bill that would come, the days of work I'd miss, and Victor Reeves' smirking face as he watched me drive away in my vandalized car. Something hardened inside me. I'd spent 3 years accepting humiliation, stretching medications, counting every penny. I'd been patient. I'd played by the rules. And where had it gotten us? A hospital bed, a vandalized car, mockery and dismissal. As Maya finally drifted off to sleep, sedated and stable, I made a decision. "No more." "Mrs. Garcia," I whispered to our elderly neighbor, "can you stay with her? There's something I need to do." I took the bus back to our apartment, went straight to the closet, and pulled out the lockbox hidden beneath a stack of old towels. Inside was my past life, a life before. Grief and medical bills had consumed everything. My real estate license, long expired. Business cards from Martinez Development Consulting. Photos of me in a tailored suit, standing next to Daniel at ribbon-cutting ceremonies for small commercial properties we'd developed together, and underneath it all, my old laptop. I plugged it in, praying it would still work after sitting unused for nearly 3 years. The screen flickered to life, revealing files and folders from my previous career. property assessments, zoning laws, development, proposals. Daniel and I had been a team. He handled the construction side, I handled acquisition and permits. We'd been small but successful, specializing in revitalizing neglected commercial spaces in up-and-coming neighborhoods. Nothing fancy, nothing huge, but steady work that had made us comfortable and proud. Then came Maya's diagnosis at age 7, the initial hospitalization, the specialists, the equipment. Our insurance covered some, but the out-of-pocket costs mounted quickly. We'd been managing, barely, when Daniel's car spun out on an icy road 3 years ago. The funeral expenses, the loss of his income, the medical bills that kept coming from Maya. Within 6 months, I'd sold our house, liquidated our business, and taken the first of what would become many minimum-wage jobs. I opened a browser and typed in Harrington Towers parking lot, property records. The county assessor's website loaded slowly. I knew what I was looking for: ownership details, tax records, zoning designations. Daniel used to tease me about my obsession with documentation. You don't just dot the I's and cross the T's, he'd say. You investigate the ink manufacturer and interview the person who designed the font. Hours passed as I followed digital breadcrumbs, taking notes in a spiral notebook. Victor Reeves had purchased the lot 15 years ago through a holding company called VR Properties. The original zoning had been commercial residential mixed use, but somewhere along the line, it had been changed to commercial only. I searched for the amendment filing, curious about when it had happened. The results showed nothing. That was odd. Zoning changes required public notices, hearings, documentation. I dug deeper, pulling up historical satellite images of the property. The lot had once been part of a larger parcel that included what was now Harrington Towers. At some point, the properties had been subdivided. Subdivision also required proper filing and approval. I searched for the records. Again, nothing. I was still searching when my phone alarm buzzed, reminding me to pick up Maya from the hospital. I'd been working for 6 hours straight without noticing the time. I couldn't afford to take a day off work, but Maya needed me. I called my supervisor at the office building. Mr. Peterson, I'm sorry, but my daughter was hospitalized last night. I need to take her home and get her settled. His sigh crackled through the phone. Martinez, this is the 3rd time this year. No, I can work a double tomorrow to make up the hours. See that you do. And Ellie. Victor mentioned you need to move your car from the executive lot. My grip tightened on the phone. I'll take care of it. After retrieving Maya from the hospital and settling her at home with strict instructions to rest, I returned to my research. The subdivision irregularity nagged at me. It might be nothing, a clerical error, a misfiled document, but my instincts told me otherwise. I remembered something Daniel used to say: real estate isn't just about the buildings, it's about the paper trail. Every property tells a story, if you know how to read it. I needed to see the physical records. The county assessor's office would have the original documents, the ones that might not have been properly digitized. But I also needed to keep my jobs, take care of Maya, and somehow scrape together enough money to fix my car and pay the mounting medical bills. I looked at the calendar on the wall, with its careful notations of Maya's doctor appointments, my work, shifts, bill due dates. There were no empty spaces, no room for this new mission. But as I watched Maya sleeping, her small body curled protectively around her insulin kit, even in slumber, I knew I had to make room. I pulled out my phone and set the alarm for 3 a.m. 4 hours of sleep would have to be enough. The county records office opened at 8 o'clock. If I went early, I could be first in line, do my research, and still make it to my afternoon shift. I just needed to be smarter, work harder, sleep less, and find out if Victor Reeves had built his fortune on a foundation of paperwork errors that I could use to finally turn our lives around. 2 nights later, I was back at Harrington Towers, pushing my cleaning cart through the executive offices on the 40th floor. My car was now parked 3 blocks away in the public lot, costing me $15 a day I couldn't afford. The cracked windshield remained unrepaired. I'd spent my morning at the county records office, but had found nothing conclusive, just more questions about missing documentation for the parking lots. I needed more evidence. The executive floor was empty at 11 p.m. I moved methodically from office to office, emptying trash cans, vacuuming carpets, wiping down surfaces. When I reached Victor Reeves' corner office, I paused. His assistant had left, the desk in disarray unusual for the typically meticulous woman. Papers were scattered across the surface, file folders open. A post-it note on the computer screen read, VR Properties Audit Files, urgent need by 8 a.m. My heart raced. I shouldn't look. I could lose my job, but then I remembered Maya's pale face in the hospital bed, the word trash scratched into my car door. Victor's dismissive laugh. I set down my cleaning supplies and quickly scanned the documents. Most were standard business papers, expense reports, meeting minutes, lease agreements, but one folder caught my eye. Harrington Development Original Parcels. Inside were blueprints and surveyor reports from 20 years ago, when the Harrington complex was first built. I snapped quick photos with my phone, careful to maintain the exact arrangement of the papers. As I was about to close the folder, a small detail jumped out at me, a notation on the original property survey that didn't match what I'd seen in the public records. According to this document, the parking lot had never been properly subdivided from the main Harrington property. The paperwork had been initiated but never completed, which meant that technically, legally, the parking lot might not belong to Victor Reeves at all. I took more photos, my hands trembling with a mixture of fear and excitement. If what I was seeing was accurate, Victor had been collecting parking fees and property income from land he didn't legally own for 15 years. I carefully replaced everything exactly as I'd found it, and continued my cleaning routine, mind racing with possibilities. The next morning, exhausted from another night of minimal sleep, I found myself at the community legal aid office, waiting to speak with the volunteer attorney. The place was crowded with people in situations similar to, or worse than mine, facing eviction, fighting for disability benefits, dealing with debt collectors. Ms. Martinez, a young man with rumpled clothes and kind eyes, called my name. I'm David Lynn, volunteer attorney. How can I help you today? In his small office, walls lined with law books and motivational posters, I carefully explained what I'd discovered, showing him the photos I'd taken. Let me get this straight, David said, leaning forward. You believe the parking lot was never properly subdivided from the main Harrington property? Yes, and if that's true, then Victor Reeves has been illegally collecting income from it for years. David frowned. If you're right, and that's a big if, then the lot would still belong to whoever owns the main Harrington building. Atlantis Group, I said. They're a corporate real estate investment firm based in New York. They bought Harrington Towers 10 years ago. Why do you care about this? David asked bluntly. What's your stake? I hesitated, then told him about Maya, the vandalized car, the new parking policy. I need leverage, I admitted. Something to negotiate with. David looked skeptical. You're talking about going up against a wealthy, connected businessman over a property dispute you discovered while ... What? Snooping through his files while cleaning his office. This isn't exactly a strong position. Ms. Martinez, I understand the risks, I said, but I'm out of options. My daughter needs better medical care than I can afford. I need to change our situation, he sighed, running a hand through his already disheveled hair. I'll look into the property records, see if there's anything to your theory. But please, don't do anything with this information yet. Property law is complicated, and even if there was an error, there could be easements, adverse possession claims. I understand, I said, though determination was already hardening inside me. Thank you for your help. As I left the legal aid office, my phone buzzed with a text from Mrs. Garcia. Maya's school nurse called. Blood sugar very high. She's in the nurse's office. They're asking for you to bring additional testing supplies. I closed my eyes briefly, calculating, if I missed my afternoon receptionist shift to get Maya, I'd lose those hours. If I didn't, the school might call an ambulance again, thousands in medical bills we couldn't afford. No matter what choice I made, we lost. The game was rigged against us, unless I could change the rules entirely. I was mopping the lobby floor at Harrington Towers when I first noticed Mrs. Chen watching me. She was a small woman in her 60s, always impeccably dressed in modest suits, who worked in the accounting department. Unlike the executives, she always smiled at the cleaning staff and knew most of us by name. You're working very hard tonight, Ms. Martinez, she said, pausing by the elevators. I straightened, wincing at the pain in my lower back. Just doing my job, Mrs. Chen. She glanced around to make sure we were alone. I saw what happened to your car. It wasn't right. I stiffened. No, it wasn't. I also saw you looking at those property documents in Mr. Reeves' office the other night. My heart plummeted. Mrs. Chen, I can explain. She held up one small hand. I've worked for Harrington Properties for 32 years. I'm retiring next month. She lowered her voice. Before I go, I'd like to see certain imbalances corrected. What do you mean? I've managed the books for all of Victor's properties. I know things. She handed me a small business card, my personal number. Call me tomorrow afternoon at exactly 2:15. I take my break then and walk to the coffee shop across the street. Before I could respond, she stepped into the elevator, leaving me with a damp mop and a flutter of dangerous hope. The next day, I called her from a payphone near Maya's school. The parking lot isn't the only property with documentation issues, Mrs. Chen said without preamble. Victor has been operating this way for decades. He finds loopholes, creates shell companies, manipulates records. That's illegal, I said. Yes, but proving it requires evidence. I can provide some of that evidence. Why would you help me? I asked. You're risking your job, your retirement. There was a pause. 30 years ago, I made a small accounting error that cost the company money. Victor has held it over my head ever since, keeping me in my position without advancement, threatening to report me if I ever complained. Her voice hardened. I've spent 3 decades watching him mistreat people, especially women and minorities. I've had enough. What do you have? Financial records showing the parking lot has been operating as part of the main Harrington property for tax purposes, even while Victor claimed it as a separate entity for income purposes. It's textbook fraud. My pulse quickened. That could be enough to negotiate, she finished firmly. Not to destroy him. Victor has powerful friends. Be smart about this, Ms. Martinez. You want a solution, not a war. How do I get these records? There's a maintenance closet on the 3rd floor, near the fire exit. The key code is 4729. I'll leave a flash drive taped under the bottom shelf of cleaning supplies at 7 p.m. tomorrow. Don't let anyone see you retrieve it. The line went silent as she hung up. The next evening, my hands trembled as I entered the code and found the small black flash drive exactly where she'd promised. I slipped it into my pocket and continued my cleaning rounds, heart pounding every time I passed another employee. That night, after Maya was asleep, I plugged the drive into my laptop. It contained years of financial records, all meticulously organized in folders by year and property. Mrs. Chen had even included a document outlining exactly which records showed the discrepancies. For the first time in 3 years, I felt something I'd almost forgotten. Not much, just a spark, but it was there. I had evidence. I had an ally. I had the beginnings of a plan. What I needed next was money. My first stop was Meridian Bank, where I'd once had business accounts for our development company. The loan officer, a young man who couldn't have been more than 20, barely glanced at my application before shaking his head. Your credit score is below our threshold, Ms. Martinez, and you don't have sufficient income or collateral. I understand my financial situation isn't ideal, I said carefully, but this is a solid investment opportunity with virtually guaranteed returns. I'm sorry, he said, not sounding sorry at all. Perhaps try a credit union. 3 more banks, 3 more rejections. Each one stung worse than the last. My final attempt was at First Community Bank, where I'd once known the branch manager. He'd retired, replaced by a woman who listened politely before delivering the same verdict. We can't approve a loan based on potential legal action, she explained. The risk is simply too high. Outside, I leaned against the building, fighting tears of frustration. My phone showed 4 missed calls from Maya's school. I couldn't even afford to keep it charged regularly anymore. I had one option left. Thomas Jenkins had been my mentor when I first entered real estate development. He'd retired 5 years ago but still lived in the city. I hadn't spoken to him since Daniel's funeral. His house was in an older established neighborhood, not ostentatious but solid and well-maintained, like Thomas himself. I'd called ahead, but standing on his porch, I nearly lost my nerve. The door opened before I could retreat. Ellie Martinez, Thomas said, his voice warm despite the surprise in his eyes. My God, it's been years. He was thinner, his hair completely white now, but his eyes were the same sharp, assessing, kind. I'm sorry to show up like this, I began. Nonsense, come in. His living room was lined with books and photos, including one of me and Daniel at our first property closing. I looked away quickly. How's that little girl of yours? Thomas asked as he brought coffee. Maya's struggling. Her diabetes is hard to manage with our current situation. Thomas studied me over his cup. And what exactly is your current situation, Ellie? Last I heard, you were closing a deal on that strip mall renovation in Oakwood. That kindness in his voice nearly broke me. I told him everything: Daniel's death, Maya's medical needs, the janitor job, the vandalized car, and finally, what I'd discovered about Victor Reeves and the parking lot. You always were thorough, Thomas said when I finished. Your attention to documentation details was what set you apart. I need a loan, I said directly. $15,000 to file the legal paperwork, hire representation if needed, and cover living expenses while this plays out. That's a substantial sum. I know, and I know my credit is destroyed. But I can offer my car as collateral. And Thomas held up his hand. Your car that's currently vandalized and worth maybe $2,000. Ellie, be serious. I flushed with embarrassment. It's all I have. He was quiet for a long moment. Tell me exactly what your plan is. Not just the legal challenge. What's your end game? I don't want to own a parking lot forever, I admitted. I want to force Victor to negotiate, either buy the property rights from me legitimately or compensate me enough that I can get Maya the care she needs and restart my career. Thomas nodded, slowly. And if I give you this loan, what are my terms? Hope flickered. 15% interest, payable when I settle with Victor, and I'll consult on your son's new restaurant development for free. A smile tugged at his lips. You've done your homework. Jake's been struggling with that project, I know. I saw the permit issues in the public records. Thomas laughed outright. Still the same, Ellie. He sobered. I'll give you the loan. Not for 15%, that's loan shark territory. 7%, and yes to the consulting. I blinked back tears. Thank you, Thomas. I won't let you down. I know you won't. He reached for his checkbook. Just promise me one thing, when you've got Victor on the ropes. Remember why you're doing this. It's for Maya, not revenge. As I left with the check, I wondered if I could keep that promise. Because with each passing day, the line between saving my daughter and making Victor pay was becoming increasingly blurred. The county clerk's office was nearly empty when I arrived. Clutching a manila folder of documents I'd prepared over 3 sleepless nights, Maya was staying with Mrs. Garcia for the day, an arrangement I was relying on too frequently, but unavoidable. I'd like to file a property dispute claim, I told the clerk, sliding the paperwork across the counter. She barely looked up. Fee is $425. Case number will be assigned within 3 business days. Preliminary hearing date will be mailed to the address on file. I handed over the munia, significant chunk of Thomas's loan, and watched her stamp each page methodically before giving me a carbon copy receipt. How long until the hearing? I asked. 6 to 8 weeks, unless you file for expedited processing. And how much is that? Additional $750. I swallowed hard. I'll stick with the standard timeline. Outside, I called David Lynn, the legal aid attorney, from a payphone. I filed the paperwork. I told him. He sighed. I thought we agreed you'd wait until I finished researching this. We don't have time to wait. My daughter doesn't have time. Ellie, this is a complicated case. If you've filed incorrectly, I didn't. I cut in. I double-checked everything against the county requirements. The claim challenges Victor Reeves, ownership based on improper subdivision and fraudulent zoning changes. You named Victor directly, not just VR Properties. Both, and I've included documentation showing he's been reporting the property differently for tax purposes than for income. David was quiet for a moment. You've done your homework. But Victor will fight this hard. He has the resources to bury you in legal motions and delays. Let him try, I said, with more confidence than I felt. All I need is for the county to investigate the property records. Once that happens, Victor will have to deal with me. What exactly do you want from him? A fair settlement. Enough to cover Maya's medical needs and restart my life. And if he offers to simply fix the paperwork issues and maintain ownership, I hadn't considered that possibility then. I'd need substantial compensation for the years he's been illegally profiting. Be realistic, Ellie. Your claim might get the county's attention, but it's hardly a slam-dunk case. You need to be prepared for different outcomes. I gripped the phone tighter. Just tell me you'll help me if this goes to court. I'll help as much as I can, he said, but I have dozens of other cases, and legal aid's resources are limited. Have you considered what happens if you lose? I hadn't allowed myself to think about failure. I can't lose, David. I don't have that luxury. 3 days later, an official county letter arrived, confirming my case number and a preliminary hearing date 6 weeks away. I placed it carefully in my growing file of documents. That evening at work, I was vacuuming the executive floor when Victor's assistant hurried past, looking harried. She didn't notice me as she entered his office, where I could hear Victor's voice raised in anger. "What do you mean? A property dispute? From whom?" I couldn't make out the assistant's quieter response. "Martinez, the janitor. Is this some kind of joke?" I turned off the vacuum, my heart pounding as I strained to hear. "Get Kent on the phone immediately," Victor barked, "and pull all the files on the Harrington lot. Every document we have." I resumed vacuuming, a small smile playing at my lips. The first move had been made. The next morning, I received a formal letter from Kent and Associates, Victor's attorneys, demanding I withdraw my frivolous and unfounded claim immediately or face countersuit for legal expenses and defamation. I called Mrs. Chen. "He's scared," she confirmed. "I've never seen him like this. He's had the accounting department pulling records all day." "Good," I said. "Let him sweat." But that afternoon, I received another blow. My supervisor at Harrington called to inform me that my position was being restructured and my services were no longer required. Victor was fighting back. I'd expected this, but the lost income would hurt badly. That night, I sat at our small kitchen table, calculator in hand, running the numbers yet again. Without the janitorial job, we'd be short on rent next month unless I picked up additional hours at my receptionist position. Maya watched me from the sofa, where she was doing homework. "Are you okay, Mom?" I forced a smile. "Just fine, Mia. Just some grown-up math." "Is it about the parking lot?" I looked up, startled. "How did you know about that?" She shrugged. "I heard you talking on the phone." "Are you really suing Mr. Reeves?" "It's complicated, honey." "Is that why you lost your job at the tower?" Nothing escaped her, probably. "But it's going to be worth it because we'll get money." "Because we'll get justice," I corrected. "And yes, hopefully enough money for your medical needs and maybe a fresh start." Maya nodded solemnly. "I believe in you, Mom." As she returned to her homework, I realized the stakes had just gotten higher. I wasn't just fighting for financial security anymore. I was fighting to show my daughter that sometimes, just sometimes, the underdogs could win. Living a double life was exhausting. By day, I worked extra shifts at the medical center reception desk, trying to make up for the lost income from my janitorial job. By night, I prepared for my case against Victor, reviewing documents until my eyes burned. Maya noticed the change. "You look tired, Mom," she said one morning, as I packed her lunch. "I'm fine, Mia. Just busy." "Is it because of the parking lot thing?" I paused. Maya was too perceptive for her own good. "Partly. But don't worry about adult problems." "I'm not a baby," she protested. "I know we need money for my medicine." The simplicity of her statement broke my heart. At 10 years old, she was already worrying about financial burdens no child should carry. "We're going to be okay," I promised. "Better than okay soon." That afternoon, I received a call from a number I didn't recognize. "Ms. Martinez, this is Sandra Reeves, Victor's wife." My breath caught. "Mrs. Reeves, how did you get my number?" "That's not important. I want to meet with you, alone, regarding your claim against my husband." Warning bells rang in my mind. "I don't think that's appropriate. Any discussions should include our legal representatives." "Please," she said, her voice softening. "This isn't a trap. Victor doesn't know I'm calling. Meet me at Riverside Park, near the duck pond, at 3 o'clock today." Curiosity won out over caution. "I'll be there." Sandra Reeves was elegant in a way that spoke of old money rather than new wealth. Her clothes were expensive but understated, her jewelry minimal but flawless. "Thank you for coming," she said, gesturing to the bench beside her. "Why am I here, Mrs. Reeves?" She looked out over the pond. "Victor is disturbed by your claim, more than he should be if it were truly baseless." "It's not baseless, I know." Her direct gaze surprised me. "I've been married to Victor for 30 years. I know exactly how he operates. Then you know he's been conducting fraudulent business practices." She winced. "I prefer to think of it as aggressive capitalism. But yes, Victor cuts corners, always has. So why are we having this conversation?" "Because I want to know what you really want. Ms. Martinez, is it money? Revenge? The actual property. I considered my answer carefully. I want what's fair. Compensation for the fraud, enough to cover my daughter's medical needs, and acknowledgement of the wrong that was done. Sandra nodded thoughtfully. Victor has authorized me to offer you $50,000 to drop the claim. No admission of wrongdoing. Complete confidentiality. The amount took my breath away. It would cover Maya's medical needs for years, pay off our debts, give us breathing room, but, the property is worth millions, I said, and he's been collecting income from it illegally for 15 years. It's a generous offer considering you have no guarantee of winning in court. It's an insult, I countered, standing up, and the fact that he sent you instead of facing me himself tells me everything I need to know about how seriously he's taking this. Sandra's expression hardened. Don't be a fool. Victor will destroy you. He has resources you can't imagine. So do I said, thinking of Mrs. Chen and her financial evidence. Tell your husband my terms are simple. $1 million and a public apology, or I pursue this to the fullest extent of the law, including reporting the tax fraud to the IRS. I walked away, my heart hammering. Had I just made a terrible mistake? $50,000 would have changed our lives, but it wouldn't have been justice. That evening, as I was helping Maya with her homework, my phone rang again. Ellie, it's Thomas. I just had a very interesting call from Victor Reeves. My stomach dropped. What did he want? To warn me about you, apparently. Said you were pursuing a frivolous lawsuit and he'd hate to see me caught up in it as your financial baka. Thomas, I relax, he cut in. I told him my financial arrangements were none of his business. But Ellie, he's playing hardball. Be careful. After we hung up, I sat at the kitchen table, doubt creeping in. Was I being reckless? Should I have taken the $50,000? Maya appeared beside me, her small hand covering mine. It's going to be okay, Mom. You always say that when things are hard, we have to be brave. I pulled her into a hug, breathing in the scent of her shampoo. When did you get so wise, Mia? I learned from you, she said simply. As I held my daughter, I knew I couldn't settle, not just for the money, but for what it represented. The right to be treated with dignity. The right to fight back. For both our sakes. I had to see this through. The county courthouse was intimidating, all marble and echoing halls. I'd worn my only decent outfit, a navy dress I'd bought for job interviews 3 years ago. It hung loose now. I'd lost weight from stress and skipped meals. David Lynn met me at the entrance, looking harried, ready, as I'll ever be. Inside the hearing room, Victor sat with 2 attorneys in expensive suits. He didn't acknowledge me. Judge Harriet Coleman, a stern-looking woman in her 60s, entered and called the preliminary hearing to order. This is Martinez versus Reeves, NVR Properties. A dispute over property ownership, she stated. Ms. Martinez is representing herself with advisory counsel, correct? Yes, Your Honor, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. Mr. Reeves is represented by Kent and Associates. Let's begin with the plaintiff's claim. I stood, clutching my notes. Your Honor, my claim is straightforward. The parking lot adjacent to Harrington Towers was never properly subdivided from the main property. The paperwork was initiated but never completed. Additionally, the zoning change from mixed use to commercial was processed without proper public notice or documentation. I presented the evidence I'd gathered: county records showing the incomplete subdivision, satellite images documenting the property's history, and Mrs. Chen's financial records showing how Victor had treated the property inconsistently for tax versus income purposes. Victor's lead attorney, a smooth-talking man named Richardson, dismissed my evidence as clerical oversights and standard business practices. My client has operated this property for 15 years without issue, he argued. Ms. Martinez is attempting to exploit minor paperwork discrepancies for financial gain. We moved to dismiss this frivolous claim. Judge Coleman studied the documents, her expression unreadable. Mr. Richardson, these aren't minor discrepancies. The subdivision was never properly recorded. The zoning change lacks required documentation. Hope flared in my chest. Furthermore, she continued, the financial records suggest deliberate misrepresentation for tax purposes. Ms. Martinez's claim has sufficient merit to proceed. Victor's face darkened. He whispered furiously to his attorneys. Your Honor, Richardson tried again. My client is willing to rectify any paperwork issues immediately. I'm sure he is, Judge Coleman said dryly. However, that doesn't address the years of potential improper operation and tax implications. She turned to me. Ms. Martinez, what remedy are you seeking? This was the moment I'd prepared for. Your Honor, I believe I have legitimate claim to this property based on the incomplete subdivision. I request the court recognize my ownership, interest, and order an accounting of all income derived from the property during the period of improper operation. Victor stood abruptly. This is absurd. She's a janitor. Mr. Reeves, sit down, Judge Coleman snapped. Your witness's occupation is irrelevant. What matters are the facts and the law. Victor sat, seething. I'm ordering a full investigation into the property records, Judge Coleman announced. The county assessor's office will conduct an audit of the subdivision and zoning history. In the meantime, I'm issuing a temporary injunction prohibiting any changes to the property's status or operation. We'll reconvene in 30 days with the assessor's findings. As we left the courtroom, Victor brushed past me. You have no idea what you've started, he hissed. But his threat barely registered. I'd won the first round. Outside, David was jubilant. That went better than I expected. Judge Coleman clearly saw through their dismissals. What happens now? I asked. Now the county investigates. And Victor sweats. David's expression turned serious. But Ellie, he's going to fight dirty. Be prepared. I nodded, watching Victor and his lawyers huddled in intense conversation across the courthouse steps. I'd thrown the first punch. Now I needed to be ready for the counterblow. Victor's retaliation came swiftly. 3 days after the hearing, I received a certified letter from Kent and Associates informing me I was being sued for defamation, tortious interference with business relations, and theft of confidential information. They're claiming you stole proprietary documents from his office while working as a janitor, David explained when I called him in a panic, and that you're damaging his business reputation with false allegations. What do I do? Don't panic. It's a scare tactic. They're hoping you'll drop your claim to avoid fighting on 2 fronts. But the pressure didn't stop there. My supervisor at the medical center called me into her office the next day. Ellie, I've received some concerning information about you, she began uncomfortably. A Mr. Reeves called claiming you're involved in litigation related to document theft from your previous employer. My chest tightened. That's not true. I'm in a property dispute with Mr. Reeves, but I haven't stolen anything. She looked unconvinced. We can't have someone with legal issues working reception in a medical facility. We handle sensitive patient information. Are you firing me? We're reducing your hours while we investigate. For now, you'll be on call only. I left her office in a daze. Victor was systematically destroying my ability to support my family. That evening, Maya came home from school in tears. What happened, Mia? I asked, kneeling beside her. Zach and Emma said I shouldn't sit with them at lunch anymore. She sobbed. Their dad told them my mom is a thief. Ice filled my veins. What? Who are their parents? Mr. Peterson. He works in the building where you used to clean. One of the executives, Victor, had reached into my daughter's life to hurt me. That night, after Maya was asleep, I sat at our kitchen table, staring at Victor's lawsuit. The damages he was claiming were astronomical, $2 million for alleged harm to his business and reputation. For the first time since starting this fight, I felt true fear. What if I'd miscalculated? What if my pursuit of justice destroyed what little security we had left? My phone rang. It was Mrs. Chen, speaking in a whisper. Victor is desperate, she said. He's ordered an internal audit of all his properties. He's worried what else might be uncovered if the county starts digging. He's suing me for $2 million, Mrs. Chen, and he got me reduced to on-call at the medical center. My daughter is being ostracized at school. I expected as much, she said calmly. That's why I've prepared something for you. Check your email. I opened my laptop to find an email from an anonymous account. The attachment was a folder of financial documents, more detailed than what she'd provided before. What am I looking at? Evidence of systematic tax fraud across all of Victor's properties, not just the parking lot. He's been using different valuations for tax filings versus loan applications, hiding income in shell companies, and claiming deductions for non-existent expenses. My hands trembled as I scrolled through the documents. This is extensive. 15 years of creative accounting, Mrs. Chen confirmed. I've kept backup records of everything. If the IRS were to see these, Victor would face criminal charges, not just civil penalties. Exactly why are you giving me this now? Because you need leverage. Victor is trying to crush you with legal pressure and social isolation. This evens the playing field. After we hung up, I stared at the documents, torn. Using these would escalate the conflict dramatically. It would no longer be about one property, but about exposing Victor's entire business operation. The next morning, I received a text from an unknown number. Final offer, 100K to walk away. 24 hours to decide. I looked at Maya, carefully measuring her insulin dose for the day, and thought about her being shunned at school, about our dwindling bank account, about the pressure closing in from all sides. Then I thought about Victor's smirk when he'd watched me drive away in my vandalized car, about the executives who'd laughed at my eyesore vehicle while my daughter was in the hospital. I didn't respond to the text. Instead, I forwarded Mrs. Chen's documents to David with a simple message: time to fight back. Ms. Martinez, my name is Alexander Winters. I believe we have mutual interests to discuss. The man standing on my doorstep wore a suit that probably cost more than 6 months of my rent. His smile was practiced, professional, revealing nothing. How did you find my address? I asked, not inviting him in. I have resources. He handed me a business card. I represent Pinnacle Investment Group. We specialize in real estate acquisitions and unique opportunities. What does that have to do with me? May I come in? This conversation would be better conducted privately. I hesitated, then stepped aside. Our apartment's shabbiness seemed magnified by his presence. I'll be direct, Winters said, declining my offer of water. We're aware of your property dispute with Victor Reeves. We'd like to purchase your claim. Purchase my claim? Yes. Pinnacle would assume your legal position, handling all expenses and proceedings. In return, you'd receive immediate compensation, $250,000. The figure hung in the air between us. $250,000. Enough to move Maya to a better school district. Enough for proper medical care. Enough to restart my life. Why would you pay so much for an uncertain legal claim? Winters smiled. Let's just say Pinnacle has a particular interest in Harrington Towers and the surrounding properties. Victor Reeves has been difficult. In previous negotiations, your claim provides leverage, so you want to use me to pressure Victor into selling to you. I prefer to think of it as a mutually beneficial arrangement. You get financial security without the stress and uncertainty of prolonged litigation. We get a valuable asset for our portfolio. And what happens to the people who work at Harrington? The small businesses renting spaces? Winters waved dismissively. That's not your concern. Focus on your daughter. Think of what you could provide for her. As if summoned, Maya appeared in the doorway, her testing kit in hand. Mom, I need to check my levels before dinner. Winters glanced at Maya, then back at me, his expression softening slightly. Consider my offer, Ms. Martinez. Life is about making practical choices for those we love. After he left, I sat with Maya at our small kitchen table, helping her record her blood sugar reading. Who was that man, Mom? Someone offering to buy something from me. The parking lot thing. I nodded. Are you going to sell it? The question hung between us. What do you think I should do? Maya considered this seriously. Is it a lot of money? Yes, enough to move to a better apartment, get you the newest insulin pump, maybe even a tutor for math. But you wouldn't get to finish what you started, she observed. You always tell me not to give up when things get hard. I smiled, despite myself. This is different, Mia. Sometimes adults have to make compromises. Is that what Daddy would do? The question caught me off guard. Maya rarely mentioned Daniel. I think, I began carefully, your father would want us to be secure. But he'd also want us to stand up for what's right. Maya nodded solemnly. Then, I think you should finish it. Not because of the money, but because of the man who was mean to you and made you lose your job. It's not about revenge, Maya. No, it's about doing the right thing. That's what you always say. That night, after Maya was asleep, I called Thomas to ask his advice. $250,000 is serious money, he said after I explained Winter's offer. But why would Pinnacle pay that much for an uncertain claim? He said they want leverage against Victor, or ... Thomas paused. They already know something we don't about the validity of your claim. The county assessor's investigation must be turning up interesting findings. I hadn't considered that possibility. You think my claim is stronger than we realized? I think Pinnacle wouldn't offer that much money if they didn't see significant value. Question is, how much value? If they're willing to pay you $250,000 sight unseen, what do they think the property is actually worth? After we hung up, I researched Pinnacle Investment Group. They specialized in commercial real estate consolidation, buying adjacent properties to create larger development opportunities. In the past 5 years, they'd acquired multiple properties around Harrington Towers. The pieces clicked together. Pinnacle wanted to assemble a full city block for redevelopment. Victor's parking lot was a critical piece of that puzzle. I picked up my phone and called Winters. "I've considered your offer," I said when he answered. "I'm not interested." "Ms. Martinez, be reasonable. $250,000 guaranteed versus years of uncertain litigation. If Pinnacle wants to negotiate with me after my case concludes, I'm open to discussion, but I'm seeing this through. I can go to $300,000. That's my final offer." "No, Mr. Winters. Some things aren't for sale." As I hung up, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years, a sense of power, not over others, but over my own destiny. The building's night maintenance worker, Hector, was the first to reach out. "Ms. Martinez, we heard what's happening with you and Mr. Reeves." He shifted uncomfortably in the doorway of my apartment. "The cleaning crew, we want to help." Behind him stood 3 other workers I recognized from Harrington Towers' all-service staff, all looking nervous but determined. "Help how?" I asked, inviting them in. "We have information," said Rosa, who cleaned the executive bathrooms, "things we've seen, things we've heard when they think we're invisible." Over coffee at my kitchen table, they shared their stories. Hector had overheard Victor discussing creative accounting with his financial team. Rosa had found documents in the trash that she'd saved, sensing they might be important. James, the parking attendant, had records of cash payments that never appeared in official logs. "Why are you doing this?" I asked. "You could lose your jobs." "We already work for scraps," said Rosa. "And the way he treated you," she shook her head, "it's not right." "Besides," added Hector, "word is, if you win, things might change, maybe for the better." Their support moved me deeply. For 3 years, I'd felt isolated in my struggle. Now, suddenly, I wasn't alone. The next day, David called with news. "The county assessor's preliminary findings are in," he said, excitement evident in his voice. "They've confirmed the subdivision was never properly completed. The parking lot is technically still part of the main Harrington property, so Victor doesn't own it. Not legally, no. Atlantis Group, the owner of Harrington Towers, is the rightful owner on paper. So my claim ... is against Atlantis Group, not Victor. But then, this is crucial, the records show Victor has been collecting income and paying taxes, as if he owned the property. That's where your leverage is. I processed this information. So Victor has been essentially stealing from Atlantis Group for 15 years, exactly. And when they find out, they'll want compensation." I finished. "But where does that leave me?" "In a surprisingly strong position. You discovered the fraud. You initiated the investigation. You have a legal claim to intervene in any resolution between Victor and Atlantis." After we hung up, I sat stunned by this new development. What had begun as a personal fight for justice had expanded into something much larger: corporate fraud on a massive scale. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Channel 7 News, looking to speak with you about property dispute with Victor Reeves. Human interest angle. Please call." I stared at the message. How had a news station heard about my case? The answer came from Mrs. Chen. "The assessor's findings aren't public yet, but rumors are circulating. Several employees have spoken to reporters anonymously." That evening, as Maya and I walked to the corner store, a van with the Channel 7 logo pulled alongside us. "Ms. Martinez, Ellie Martinez," a reporter jumped out, microphone in hand. "We'd like to ask about your David versus Goliath battle with Victor Reeves." I instinctively stepped in front of Maya. "No comment. Sources say you've uncovered massive fraud. As a janitor, how did you?" I said no comment. "And please don't approach my daughter." Back in our apartment, I found social media buzzing with early versions of the story. Janitor takes on real estate mogul, single mom, uncovers $1 million fraud. My phone filled with messages from strangers offering support, asking for interviews, even proposing book deals. "What's happening, Mom?" Maya asked, wide-eyed at my suddenly vibrating phone. "People are interested in our story," I said carefully. "Are we going to be famous?" I laughed, despite my anxiety. "I hope not, Mia. I just want things to be fair." Later, that night, Thomas called. "Have you seen the news?" "It's overwhelming," I admitted. "I never wanted publicity." "Well, you've got it now. And it changes the dynamics considerably. Victor can't intimidate you quietly anymore." Too many eyes watching. Is that good or bad? Both. Public attention provides protection but also pressure. You'll need to be careful what you say and to whom. After we hung up, I sat by our window, watching the city lights. The case had taken on a life of its own, growing from a personal grievance to a public spectacle. For the first time, I truly understood the stakes. This wasn't just about Maya and me anymore. It was about all the invisible workers who cleaned offices after hours, who parked cars, who served food the people society looked through rather than at. I was fighting for all of us now. The courtroom was packed for our second hearing. Local news stations had set up cameras outside, and the gallery seats were filled with reporters, curious onlookers, and I noticed with surprise many of the service workers from Harrington Towers. Victor sat with an expanded legal team for attorneys now instead of two. He looked haggard, the confident smirk replaced by tense alertness. A new face sat at the table beside him, a representative from Atlantis Group, the actual owner of Harrington Towers. The corporation had petitioned to join the proceedings after learning of the assessor's findings. Judge Coleman called the court to order. We're here to review the county assessor's investigation into the property status of the Harrington Towers parking facility. Mr. Delgado, please present your findings. The county assessor approached the podium. Your Honor, our investigation has confirmed that the subdivision of the parking lot from the main Harrington property was initiated in 2008 but never properly completed. The required surveys were conducted, but final paperwork was never filed with the county. Additionally, the zoning change from mixed use to commercial only lacks proper documentation and public notice. What does this mean in practical terms? Judge Coleman asked. It means that legally, the parking lot remains part of the main Harrington property. Its rightful owner is Atlantis Group, not VR Properties or Mr. Reeves personally. A murmur swept through the courtroom. Victor's attorneys huddled in urgent consultation. Furthermore, the assessor continued, financial records indicate Mr. Reeves has been collecting approximately $750,000 annually in parking fees and other income from this property for 15 years without legal ownership rights. Judge Coleman turned to Victor's lead attorney. Mr. Richardson, how do you respond to these findings? Richardson stood, straightening his tie. Your Honor, my client acknowledges there may have been administrative oversights in the property transfer. However, he has operated the lot in good faith, believing the paperwork had been properly filed by his representatives. Oversights? Judge Coleman raised an eyebrow. We're talking about 15 years of collecting income from property your client didn't legally own, that goes beyond administrative error. The Atlantis Group attorney rose. Your Honor, in light of these findings, Atlantis Group is filing a separate claim against Mr. Reeves for misappropriation of property and income. We're seeking full accounting and restitution. Victor's face darkened further. And where does this leave Ms. Martinez's claim? Judge Coleman asked. David stood beside me. Your Honor, Ms. Martinez was the one who discovered and brought forward the irregularities. Without her investigation, this fraud might have continued indefinitely. We believe she's entitled to consideration in any resolution. Judge Coleman nodded. Ms. Martinez, do you wish to amend your claim in light of the assessor's findings? I stood, heart pounding. Yes, Your Honor, I'm amending my claim to seek rightful compensation as a whistleblower who uncovered this situation, and specific damages for Mr. Reeves' retaliatory actions against me, including loss of employment and defamation. Very well. Judge Coleman shuffled her papers. Given the complexity of these intersecting claims, I'm ordering mediation between all three parties, Ms. Martinez, Mr. Reeves, and Atlantis Group. If a resolution cannot be reached within 30 days, we'll proceed to trial. As court adjourned, Mrs. Chen approached me quietly. It's working, she whispered. Victor's board members are starting to ask questions about his other properties too. Outside the courthouse, reporters clamored for statements. Victor pushed past them, ignoring questions. The Atlantis representative gave a brief, corporate response about pursuing all legal remedies. When they turned to me, I simply said, this case isn't about me. It's about accountability and the principle that no one is above the law, regardless of wealth or position. As the cameras flashed, I caught Victor watching me from his car. His expression unreadable but his message clear. This was far from over. The mediation took place in a sterile conference room at the courthouse. David sat beside me, whispering reassurances as we waited for the others to arrive. Remember, you have leverage now. The public attention, the assessor's findings, Mrs. Chen's evidence, they can't intimidate you anymore. The Atlantis Group representatives entered first, three polished corporate attorneys with identical neutral expressions. Victor and his legal team followed, deliberately sitting as far from me as possible. The mediator, a retired judge named Harrison, began by outlining the claims and count. We have three intersecting issues, he summarized. The rightful ownership of the parking lot, the income collected by Mr. Reeves over 15 years, and Ms. Martinez's whistleblower status and claims of retaliation. For hours, the attorneys argued back and forth. Atlantis wanted full restitution of all parking income over $10 million. Victor's team claimed he had invested significantly in the property's maintenance and security, offsetting much of that amount. My claim seemed almost peripheral until David skillfully brought the conversation back to me. My client was the catalyst for uncovering this entire situation. He reminded them, she's suffered significant hardship as a result of Mr. Reeves' actions, including loss of employment and reputation damage affecting her family. The mediator turned to me directly. Ms. Martinez, what specific resolution are you seeking? I had rehearsed this moment with David. $1 million in compensation, reinstatement to my position with back pay, and a public acknowledgement of wrongdoing from Mr. Reeves. Victor scoffed audibly. That seems excessive for a janitor. One of his attorneys commented. My client's former occupation is irrelevant, David countered. The value of her claim is based on the fraud she uncovered and the retaliation she experienced. After 8 exhausting hours, we reached an impasse. Atlantis and Victor were focused on negotiating between themselves, barely acknowledging my presence as we prepared to leave. The mediator asked for one final private conversation with each party. When my turn came, he was surprisingly direct. Ms. Martinez, I'll be blunt. Atlantis and Reeves will eventually reach a settlement for the property. The real question is what portion you'll receive. This isn't just about money, I insisted. It's about accountability. Noble, but impractical, he replied. I suggest you reconsider your demands, focus on securing your family's future. I left the mediation discouraged but resolute. The system was designed to favor corporations and wealthy individuals, not single mothers fighting for justice. That evening, Thomas invited Maya and me to dinner at his home, a rare treat. As Maya played with his elderly golden retriever in the backyard, Thomas poured me a glass of wine. How did the mediation go? They're treating me like an inconvenience, I admitted, a complication in their corporate negotiation. Thomas nodded thoughtfully. That's because they still see you as the janitor, not as Ellie Martinez, former successful real estate developer. His words resonated. For 3 years, I'd accepted others' diminished view of me, letting my circumstances define my identity. What would the old Ellie do? Thomas asked. I considered this. She'd recognize that holding the parking lot hostage between Atlantis and Victor creates maximum leverage. Exactly. Thomas smiled. So what's your next move? The answer came with unexpected clarity. I need to approach Atlantis directly, outside the mediation. Show them I'm more valuable as a partner than an adversary. The next morning, I called the Atlantis Group representative and requested a private meeting. To my surprise, she agreed. 2 days later, I walked into Atlantis Group's downtown office wearing a suit borrowed from a former colleague, my hair professionally styled for the first time in years, carrying a proposal I'd worked on through the night. Ms. Martinez, the Atlantis executive said, clearly surprised by my transformed appearance. You wanted to discuss an alternative resolution. I placed my proposal on the table. I have a better way forward. For all of us. On a crisp Monday morning, 3 weeks later, I stood at the entrance to the Harrington Towers parking lot, watching as the new signs were installed. Martinez Property Management authorized vehicles only. The settlement had been finalized. The previous Friday, Atlantis Group had agreed to my proposal, in exchange for dropping my claim against them. They would lease the parking lot to my newly formed company for $1 per year for 10 years, with an option to renew. I would operate the lot, keep the income, and pay them a modest percentage after expenses. Victor had fought the arrangement viciously, but ultimately capitulated when Atlantis threatened to expand their investigation into his other properties. His settlement with me included a substantial payment for undisclosed considerations and the withdrawal of his defamation lawsuit. Mrs. Chen appeared beside me, smiling at the new signage. "Congratulations, Ms. Martinez. Or should I say, Madam CEO?" I laughed. "Just Ellie is fine, and I should be thanking you. None of this would have happened without your help. I've waited 30 years to see Victor face consequences," she said, quietly. "It was worth the wait." James, the former parking attendant who'd supported my case, approached nervously. "Ms. Martinez, the new payment system is installed. We're ready to open." "Thank you, James, and remember, it's Ellie to my staff." My staff? The phrase still felt surreal. I'd hired 4 former Harrington service workers to run the day-to-day operations of the lot, paying them living wages with benefits, something Victor had never done. The new rate structure was posted prominently: $5 daily for service workers, $25 for general public, $50 for Harrington executives. My phone rang. "David Lynn. Ellie, I just heard the settlement was finalized. Congratulations. I couldn't have done it without you, David." "Nonsense. You did the hard work. I just provided guidance." He paused. "The Community Legal Aid Board is very impressed with your case. They're interested in having you speak at our fundraiser next month." "I'd be honored." As I hung up, a familiar Tesla pulled up to the entrance. The driver, the same executive who'd mocked my eyesore Honda months ago, stared in confusion at the new signage. "What's going on? Where's the regular attendant?" "Martinez, property management has taken over operations," I explained pleasantly. "The daily rate for executives is now $50. He gaped at me. "That's highway robbery. It was $15 last week. Service workers now pay only $5, I continued. "We believe in equitable pricing based on ability to pay. This is outrageous." "Do you know who I am?" "Yes," I said calmly. "You're the man who called my car an eyesore while I was struggling to pay for my daughter's medical treatments. That will be $50. Please." His face flushed with recognition and embarrassment. After a moment of sputtering, he handed over his credit card. As he drove into the lot, another familiar car approached, Victor's black Mercedes. He stopped at the entrance, staring at me through the windshield. For a long moment, neither of us moved. Then, wordlessly, he handed me his credit card. "That will be $100, I said. "The sign says $50 for executives. You're a special case, Mr. Reeves. Consider it the asshole tax." He glared but said nothing as I processed his payment. As he took back his card, he finally spoke. "This isn't over, Martinez." "Actually, it is," I replied. "But don't worry, your reserved spot will always be waiting for you. Premium price, of course." As he drove away, I felt no triumph, no vindication, just a quiet sense of justice served. This wasn't about revenge. It was about consequences for actions, about the powerful learning they weren't untouchable by day's end. The lot had generated more income than it had in any single day under Victor's management. My new pricing strategy had worked exactly as planned. The executives complained, but paid, while service workers expressed gratitude for the reduced rates. That evening, I picked Maya up from school in our new used car, not fancy, but reliable and safe. "How was your first day as a boss?" she asked. "Interesting," I smiled. "How was school?" "Zach and Emma asked if they could sit with me again." She looked thoughtful. I said yes, but I told them they were mean before, and that wasn't okay. I squeezed her hand. "I'm proud of you, Mia. Are we rich now, Mom?" I laughed. "Not rich, but we're going to be okay." 6 months later, I stood in the lobby of our new office space, a small but well-appointed suite in a building adjacent to the parking lot. Martinez Property Management had expanded beyond just operating the Harrington lot. We now managed 3 additional properties in the area, with contracts for 2 more in negotiation. Rosa, my office manager, approached with a stack of mail. "The applicants for the maintenance supervisor position are here. Ellie, thanks. Send them in, one at a time, please." The company had grown to 12 employees, all former service workers with skills and potential that had been overlooked by previous employers. We offered fair wages, flexible schedules for parents, and health insurance that covered dependents. Maya's diabetes management had improved dramatically with access to better medical care. Her new endocrinologist had prescribed an advanced insulin pump system that automatically monitored her blood sugar and adjusted insulin delivery accordingly. The technology had transformed our lives, freeing Maya from constant monitoring and me from perpetual worry. We'd moved to a modest 2-bedroom apartment closer to Maya's school, nothing extravagant, but clean, safe, and with enough space for Maya to have her own room for the first time in years. The walls were covered with her artwork and academic achievements, including a recent science fair ribbon. My phone buzzed with a text from Thomas. Just heard about the West Side contract. Congratulations. Lunch next week to celebrate. Thomas had become a regular advisor to my growing business, offering mentorship and occasional financial backing when needed. His belief in me had been instrumental in rebuilding my confidence and professional identity. The business phone line rang. Mrs. Chen calling from her retirement in Arizona. I just reviewed the quarterly reports you sent, she said. Very impressive growth, Ellie. Thanks to your guidance on the financial systems. Mrs. Chen had helped me establish proper accounting practices before retiring to the sunshine. Any more trouble from Victor? She asked. Not directly. He avoids me completely now. But I heard he's being audited by the IRS. What a shame, she replied, not sounding sorry at all. After we hung up, I turned my attention to another development, the vacant lot adjacent to our parking facility. Atlantis Group had approached me about potentially developing this space as an extension of our operations. The initial design sketches sat on my desk, a modern, eco-friendly structure with mixed commercial and community spaces. If approved, it would be my first building development project since before Daniel's death. Maya's school portrait smiled at me from its frame on my desk. She looked healthier than she had in years, her cheeks fuller, her smile brighter, her eyes clear and focused. Her latest medical checkup had shown significant improvements in her condition. Knock at my office door interrupted my thoughts. David Lin entered, carrying legal documents. The paperwork for the Westside contract is finalized, he said, placing the folder on my desk. And I have news about the community development grant. We got it. I let out a breath of excitement. The grant would fund our planned after-school program for low-income children at the community center space in our new development. That's wonderful. Thank you for your help with the application. David had become the company's legal counsel, splitting his time between his community legal aid work and my growing business. His expertise had been invaluable in navigating contracts and regulatory requirements. There's something else, he said hesitantly. I heard Harrington Towers is looking for a new property management company. Their contract with the current provider is ending. I raised an eyebrow. Seriously? The same building where I was fired as a janitor now wants to hire my company. Apparently your reputation for fair practices and efficient management has spread. They specifically asked if you'd be interested in submitting a proposal. I laughed at the irony. Let me guess, Vector is furious. I believe apoplectic was the word used. As David left, I gazed out my office window at the parking lot where it all began. The space looked different now, cleaner, better maintained, with new landscaping and security features. But the most significant change wasn't physical. The lot had become a symbol of possibility, proof that systems could be challenged, that power could shift, that dignity could be reclaimed. And I was just getting started. 2 years after that first court hearing, I stood at the podium in the Harrington Towers Conference Center, addressing the building's tenants association as the newly contracted property management company for the entire complex. Martinez Property Management promises transparent operations, responsive service, and fair treatment for all tenants, regardless of size or status. I concluded my presentation. Thank you for your trust. The applause was genuine, especially from the small business owners who'd struggled under previous management. As people filed out, many stopped to shake my hand or offer congratulations. Maya sat in the back row, homework spread across her lap, occasionally glancing up to flash me a proud smile. At 12, she'd grown taller and more confident, her diabetes well controlled and her academic performance exceptional. The community scholarship program I'd established would ensure her education was secured regardless of what the future held. As the room emptied, a familiar figure lingered by the door. Victor Reeves, older, grayer, diminished somehow. His real estate empire had contracted significantly following the IRS investigation sparked by our case. He'd been forced to sell several properties to cover tax penalties and settlements. He approached hesitantly, stopping several feet away. Congratulations on the contract, he said stiffly. Thank you, I replied, surprised by his presence. An uncomfortable silence stretched between us. I've sold most of my holdings in this area, he finally continued, moving to Florida. I hope that works out for you. He nodded, then glanced around the room, his eyes landing briefly on Maya. Your daughter looks well. She is. Thank you. Another awkward pause. I've been reflecting, he said, the words clearly difficult for him. My behavior was inappropriate. Not quite an apology, but perhaps as close as Victor Reeves could manage. Yes, it was, I agreed, but it led me here. So, in a strange way, I should thank you. A ghost of his old smirk appeared, always finding the advantage. You would have been successful in real estate even without all this. Perhaps, but I like the company I've built better than the one I might have had. He nodded again, then extended his hand. Good luck, Ms. Martinez. I hesitated before shaking it briefly. Good luck in Florida, Mr. Reeves. As he walked away, Maya appeared beside me. Was that him, the parking lot man? Yes, that was Victor. She studied his retreating figure. He looked sad. Actions have consequences, Mia. Sometimes those consequences last a long time. Later that evening, I hosted a small celebration at our new home, a modest but comfortable townhouse with a garden where Maya could play. Thomas was there, along with David, Mrs. Chen, who'd flown in for the occasion, and several of my employees and their families. As we shared food and laughter, I slipped away briefly to the quiet of my home office. On the wall hung framed mementos of our journey: the original property claim filing, a newspaper article about the case, the first day's receipts from the parking lot, Maya's improved medical reports, and in the center, a photograph of my rusted Honda with its cracked windshield and trash, keyed into the door, a reminder of where we'd started and how far we'd come. My phone buzzed with a text from a local business owner. Would you consider taking over management of our building too? Current company, terrible. Needs someone fair. Requests like this arrived weekly now. Each one represented not just business growth but expanding influence chances to implement the ethical practices and fair treatment I'd fought for. I rejoined the party, watching as Maya showed Mrs. Chen her science project on renewable energy. The girl caught my eye and grinned, secure and thriving in ways I'd feared might never be possible during our darkest days. Thomas raised his glass to Ellie, who reminded us all that justice sometimes arrives in unexpected packages. As glasses clinked and congratulations flowed, I thought about the people still struggling as we once had, working multiple jobs, skipping medications, enduring humiliation to survive. Tomorrow, I would announce the Martinez Fund, buy a percentage of our company profits, and dedicate it to providing medical assistance and legal support for low-income families. The parking lot that had once been a symbol of my powerlessness would now generate resources to empower others. The journey from cleaning floors to owning the building had been improbable, exhausting, and worth every difficult step. Maya slipped her hand into mine. Are you happy, Mom? I looked around at this life we'd built from nothing but determination and justified anger transformed into purposeful action. Yes, Mia, very happy. Me too, she said simply. And I'm proud of you. Not because you own things now, but because you didn't give up when it was really hard. In that moment, I knew the true victory wasn't the contracts or properties or even the financial security. It was standing before my daughter as living proof that dignity could be defended, that systems could be changed, that one person, even someone society overlooked, could demand justice and actually receive it. If this story touched your heart, Maya announced to our guests with surprising confidence, remember it next time someone tries to make you feel small. Mom says everyone deserves to be seen, and everyone's car deserves a parking spot. If some people have to pay a premium rate. As laughter filled our home, I silently thanked that old Honda and the word trash carved into its door. Sometimes, the things meant to break us become the very tools we use to build something better.